girls. I am so excited to talk to you today about how to compare and contrast two stories to find out what's similar or the same about them and what are the things that are different between the two books. So I want you to start by remembering what we talked about yesterday, the 5-finger retell. I want you to think about the characters, the setting, the problem, events, and solution in the story. I also want you to think about the genre. Is this a fiction text or a nonfiction text? That's going to be important to start our comparison, okay? So you have in your Google Classroom 2 books. There's going to be a read aloud of each book, and there's also going to be pages that you can follow along with. The first book is called A Plum Grows, and the second book is called Len's Tomato Plant. We know right away that A Plum Grows is a nonfiction text. That means it's giving me information and facts. It's going to use things like diagrams and photographs to show me information about a plum. The author's purpose for writing this book was to give information. The book Len's Tomato Plant still does help me understand how a tomato plant grows, but the author's purpose for this book was probably to entertain you. This story is a fiction book. There's not actually a little boy named Len who grew a tomato plant and shared it with his the tomatoes with his parents. But since there could be a little boy named Len somewhere who grew a tomato plant, this is called a realistic fiction book. That means it could have happened, but it didn't actually happen, okay? So that's one way that we're going to compare these two texts. I want to know, is their genre the same or is it different? So I'm going to use a Venn diagram. That's 2 circles that overlap, and you write the things that are different on each side of the circle, and you write the things that are the same in the middle. So on this side, I have all the things that only have to do with the book A Plum Grows. And on this side of my Venn diagram, I have only things and information about the book Len's Tomato Plant. In the middle, I wrote things that are the same about both books. And that's something I learned about compare and contrast. So right here we have our I can statement. I can compare and contrast story elements, okay? I can compare and contrast story elements. And I say compare like this because when you compare, you find out how 2 things are alike. And when you contrast, you find out how those things are different. And I put a 5 for our story elements because that reminds me of my 5-finger retell. Now the story elements in a fiction book and a nonfiction book are going to be a little bit different. A nonfiction book might not have a problem or a solution, but it also might not have characters or a setting, but that's okay. Both books will still have a beginning, a middle, and an end. There will be information in both books that we can compare and contrast. So for the genre, I compared and contrasted, and I discovered that A Plum Grows is a nonfiction text and Len's Tomato Plant is realistic fiction. So those are things that are different, so I'm going to put them on different sides of the Venn diagram. Something that's the same about both books, though, is that both books are about plants, right? Thumbs up if you agree. Okay, characters. Let's look at characters, right? Because that's our first item on our 5-finger retell. Well, in the book A Plum Grows, there were no characters. It's a nonfiction text. It's giving me facts about plums. In the book Len's Tomato Plant, the characters were Len, his mother, and father. Easy peasy. So that's all I wrote. Let's talk about the setting. I can't think of a setting because in the book A Plum Grows, it starts in with like pictures of plums, but it doesn't show them in a grocery store. I see a plum growing on a tree, but it doesn't really tell me where that is. Here's a plum tree farm. It says plums grow in the country, so I could put that, but it's not really a story that takes place in a certain location. Len's tomato plant, though, I know that takes place at Len's house and in his garden. How about the problem? Is there a problem in a plum grows? Nope, I don't think so. But what's the problem in Len's tomato plant? He thinks his plants are sick because they haven't grown fast enough. The tomatoes aren't turning red quick enough for Len. How about the events? Now this is where we can compare and contrast the events in both books. So what I did here was I wrote first, next, then, and last. And I just talked about the way a plum grows. I talked about what happened in the book A Plum Grows. First, a seed is planted and a seedling forms. Then the stem grows hard and becomes a trunk, and that's called a sapling. And last, the tree flowers in the spring, and those flowers turn into plums. Now, I used beginning, middle, and end for Len's tomato plant because that's what I used in my 5-finger retell, and so I thought that was the easiest way. At the beginning, Len plants a tomato plant. In the middle, he waits for it to grow, and at the end, the tomatoes are red and ripe. He picks them for salad. So from there, I know that both tomato plants and plum plants start as a seed, and then when they're ripe and done growing, they can be picked and eaten. Awesome. Both books also give me information about how plants grow. What do those plants need to grow? Well, in Len's tomato plant, he watered his plant every day. It needed sunlight to grow. And in A Plum Grows, we learned that those little plum seeds need soil, they need sunlight, and they need water. Both tomato plants and plum plants need those same things to grow. So I wrote that. And both plants give us something to eat. Just the way we learned the information was a little bit different. At the end for solution, I put that since there was no problem, A Plum Grows did not need to share a solution with us. But the solution for Len's tomato plant was that he waited patiently, and then in the end he got his tomato plant. So now we have read both books, we've listened to both books, we've chosen a Venn diagram to compare, find out what is the same, and contrast, state the differences between the two books that we read, A Plum Grows and Len's tomato plant. I included 2 different Venn diagrams for you guys to try out. One has lines and it uses boxes. That's okay, as long as the differences, what you are contrasting, stay on the outside, and the things that are the same, what you're comparing, are on the middle. So you can use a circular Venn diagram like I did, or you can use one that uses boxes and has some lines, okay? I hope this was helpful. Please let me know if you guys have any questions about how to compare and contrast story elements in 2 texts.